Hello everyone, this is Rangadad, not financial advice, just the way I'm looking at the market. Interesting weekend, pretty flat. Seems to want to find a bit of a rollover, but we'll have a look at a few different time frames and just see what the likelihood of that is. Realistically, daily bullish smart money indicators still postured to the upside. It would have to drop a fair bit, I think, for that to not be the case. BBWP is decreasing. The interesting thing for that is if we come back into, less than 10%, even less than 15%, and that turns around, then the next run could be pretty explosive, whichever way it goes. So something to keep in mind, the fact that we're resetting on BBWP and stochastic momentum is so high, could lead to a decent pullback, but at the same time, this can kind of chop around quite low. So, but yeah, as you can see here, we didn't have the same sort of stochastic momentum level, but once this started to expand, once it was on the down, it just kept sliding. So yeah, we are right at the top of this channel that I have had drawn in for a while. It's not a hard and fast sort of channel, this one, because Bitcoin has broken through it a couple of times. There's no real set level through here. Might be one on the weekly or something, but for the time being, I don't pay a huge amount. It's just interesting that we are starting to flatten off at a fairly critical level. We have cleared this vector candle here, and if it decides to run through this, I actually think there's a fair chance we would come up to, what's that, around the 70,000 mark. That's probably where you're going to get a bit of pullback, but just keep in mind there is another vector candle over here on the daily, and daily vector candles are pretty attractive to price. So, it may be that we just keep sort of pushing up. And if BBWP resets, and we are still somewhere in that bullish control zone, then something like this could be quite possible, in which case I would be expecting a bigger pullback at some stage. But I think this week might be governed a little bit by by the overall stock market, because it is quite overextended at the moment. I don't think there's going to be a huge crash, but I'm still thinking somewhat of a pullback. If we do start to pull back here, have a couple of days of pullback while this resets, potentially stochastic momentum comes back down out of that bullish control zone, doesn't have to come out much. It can't even stay in there, but just something, a decent pullback on stochastic momentum to give us a chance to have a run up. Then, if this expands as that's happening, it could be a decent run. But just bear in mind that it could be a decent pullback as well. So I'm not too worried about this. Obviously the highest volume area is an attractive spot for it. There's going to be a few EMAs in that area as well. Does it come back a little bit further than that? Maybe. But it's just kind of a suck it and see kind of moment. But the fact that Bitcoin's held up and flattened off through the weekend isn't a bad thing. We note here that this orange line here, the global liquidity has jumped quite a bit over the last few days. So that's something to keep in mind. I think this increase is actually a bit to do with the Chinese stimulus that was announced. So whenever global liquidity is going up, there is a chance that Bitcoin will keep going, and general stock markets will keep going. So in terms of daily, not really much to write home about. We're not getting much of an idea off these. They're both indecision candles. It's just, yeah, whichever way it goes, it'll probably be a decent move, I think. What I will do though is I'll come down to lower time frames. Obviously, we got some contraction here, the Bollinger Bands. There's no real certainty around any breakout here at the moment. If anything, it's probably still got a way to come down. I think it just needs to reset a little bit more. But if we sort of bounce off this 50 again, then, you know, on the 15-minute, I think that's a 50. Yeah. If we bounce off this again, then it could be a decent run up. But you want to see clear sort of signs that something's happening. One of the things I'm keeping an eye on at the moment, not just this, I'm pretty surprised this morning they didn't take this bit of liquidity up in here. It still kind of looks like they want it, but it could also be a fake out to come back down, draw a bit more liquidity in down the bottom here. So, you know, if they do go and take that, you know, that's down into the high 64s. And I think it looks close to actually confirming that at the moment. Already had that out. That was a pretty big reversal candle there on the 15-minute as well, so keep that in mind. But one thing that's interesting is open interest is actually increasing here. Typically, when open interest is increasing, the price is generally tending up. As open interest is decreasing, and you could argue that we're still in an overall downtrend on it here, but when you look at a bit closer, we seem to be basing here. If this continues to push up and we get a little bit more of a ramp up, then I think up is probably more likely. But at the moment, that's a sign that we may have found a little local top. This 200 EMA on the 15-minute is going to be... Oh, so maybe that was the 200 that we were looking at before. Anyway, yeah, the 200 EMA is going to be pretty important, I think. It's sitting at around 65,600 at the moment. If it breaks through that, then downside's more likely. That 64.5 region is fair game. There is a massive order here. Massive. It's big. 340 Bitcoin, about $21-22 million worth. That's potentially going to be a magnet for it. But you can see here the liquidation map. There's a fair bit more liquidity to the downside than there is the upside on Binance at the moment. So whether we get another push up to try and get these orders, I don't know. At this stage, I'm leaning more to the downside. But we are just so close to this liquidity that a spike into that wouldn't be unheard of. But yeah, like the signs that this is a top here are pretty weak, like compared to something like this where you get a big blow off. And at the same time, we're not really at the same level. So open interest is suggesting we may push a little bit higher, but it's just we haven't seen a ramp in either direction. So if we see a quick sell, like a quick drop in open interest, then potentially more downside. That's why this chart here can be pretty useful in these sort of areas to just see whether it's a real breakout or not. Okay. At the moment, no real read on that. Just tending towards upside. There's a lot of stuff suggesting it could be downside though. Let's go to the hourly. Hourly gives a bit of a better idea even. That, you know, a big red vector candle at the high there suggests we will have another pullback. The fact that we're getting vectors at the extremes here just suggests we could even be in this range for a little bit longer while it's building, which would kind of tie in with the whole BBWP resetting and then we go on a run. It's just a matter of what they're building for. And whilst price is sort of above this 1 hour 50, then it's hard to be bearish. Looking at this chart, the flows are sort of suggesting that we do keep going. Now, to the downside, if we do break to the downside, the targets are around that 64. I said 64 and a half. That would pick up this vector candle here. It is obviously a bit of an area of reversal here, which could mean support. I'd be surprised if it didn't try and take out part of this vector candle as well, so back down into the 64K region, at which point we've then broken the 200 EMA on the hourly. Is that super important? We'll just have to wait and see. But look, there is room to the downside on a lot of this. Your stochastic momentums on multiple time frames are sort of multiple higher time frames are quite overextended, but you know, overextended means they're in the bullish control zone too. So just keep that in mind. Hourly stochastic is actually tending to the upside at the moment still. We could be rolling over here though if it starts to come down. Oh, excuse me. Quick look at the 4 hour. The other thing with these two, this probably isn't the right chart, but generally, what have I got that? Bollinger Bands. I'll change that to a 20. Generally, once you cross within a 20 after being outside a 20 Bollinger Band, it will come back, at least test the mid band, which it has. But we're rejecting off the top of this here as well. So you're looking at 65,350 at the moment as being a key point of interest. Probably it'll come up a little bit. So probably 65,500, which has been a level that's found a bit of support through here. All these wicks come down to about that level. And you got a basically a reversal off that level as well. So the reaction at this point is going to be quite telling on the 1 hour and 4 hour in particular. If we bounce from that, you're looking for closures above that 20 Bollinger Band. And then if that's the case, then it'll probably keep going. But at the moment, you know, it's postured to the downside over the next probably 8 to 16 hours, I think. In which case, does it keep going? If you're looking at this, you got downside over the next 8 hours or so, down to at least this level. It's going to be pretty critical to see what happens there. If we bounce off that, then I would actually expect this thing to keep going. But we have had a decent run, so you could call this three pushes up, but at the same time, it may not be three. So if you said that, because this one here is too short, if you're going to go like eddy wave, or what is it? Not eddy. Fuck it. Whatever it is. All I know is you're looking for a pullback in here. If you get a decent pullback, you're looking for another run up that would be somewhere around the same as the first one. Let's call it somewhere around there, which would take you up to about the 69,000 mark, which is pretty close to that previous high in that vector candle there. At which point, do we have enough momentum to sort of clear that and push into the 70K mark? Probably. It all depends when it does that pullback and how ferocious it is. So, you don't have to move it up by much. So if we pull back into even just into this area here, which is a pretty high volume area, around that 63K mark, and go from there, then that would make a lot of sense. So at this stage, let's call it somewhere, if we get a pullback now, which just keeping an eye on those levels that I mentioned before, that 65,500 level. If we get a pullback, then this sort of area here, I think is going to be the target. Which I think if we go, let's go low to high, that's pretty well smack bang on the 382. So that's what I think is probably going to happen. It's probably going to take a couple of days to come back down to that level. I'd be a little bit surprised if we move down there in a hurry. But a few days to move down and then a push back up would make a lot of sense. All right, so that's Bitcoin. NASDAQ had a little pullback. Looks like it could be the start of a decent one. Volatility, like BBWP, is decreasing as well, so it's probably not going to be a massive pullback. Whereas when this started, volatility was quite a bit higher, I think. Yeah. I think this week in particular, so first week of October, coming into the first week of October, somewhere around the 19,250-ish for the NASDAQ is a critical level, and it probably will get there. There were a lot of big dark pool transactions around the highs of last week. Doesn't necessarily mean a hell of a lot, but it does normally mean pullbacks will happen when they occur at the highs. What you want to watch out for is when they occur at the lows as well. It's just this thing here, this global liquidity, could actually mean that we actually stay quite high and keep pushing. Futures aren't open yet. No. S&P 500, same sort of deal. Still got that target in here. Probably just moving averages have come up. It's probably still the target, to be honest. Somewhere between 5,500 and 5,570. I think you really need to be seeing a bounce around there, and you need to see it get back above this trend line. I think would be useful. But again, it's hard to be saying there's going to be a really big pullback while stochastic momentum's still in that bullish control zone. Your bullish smart money indicator hasn't signaled a sell or anything yet. And global liquidity is actually increasing. So this could just be a temporary little sort of sideways pullback in time rather than a proper pullback in dollar value. Equal weight has actually kind of bucked the trend on the rest of the S&P. It closed at a new all-time high. IWM's bouncing a little bit. Stochastic momentum still to the downside. Bullish smart money indicator is actually trending up a little bit, but it's still not liking this move too much. XLI is still climbing. XLY, XLP is still high. So again, we're not seeing. Looks like the banking ETFs might have reversed a little bit as well. So that's a good sign. ITB is up, so home construction's up. Again, this doesn't look like a market that's about to crash. Good turnaround on DJI versus gold. You actually want that to keep going up. Keep an eye on this one though. Yeah, looks okay. So we could be in for more upside without much pullback yet. VIX has jumped a little. The skew has actually bounced back up a little bit. So kind of consistent with a pullback in time, really, isn't it? Yeah, having the skew pop back up suggests that we could actually keep going up a little bit. So something to keep in mind there as well. We were sort of showing that as a read that we were probably pulling back a little bit last week, but you could just be saying that this is a pullback in time rather than a proper pullback in dollar value. Wow, Hang Seng broke that 800. What was our target on that? So next target is 22,623-ish. Let's put a horizontal ray on that. I don't know if that's a vector resistance. It's just resistance. That's a pretty decent push. I think this is a trade where there's a lot of people in it now. That was a very good buying opportunity in that channel that we had there. So now you're looking for sells up in this channel up here somewhere. There's not a lot before that, I don't think. There's a little spike here, but I think that's going to be the main target, somewhere around there. Japanese is coming down a bit. Needs to find some support here to keep going up. TLT is bouncing, which you'd kind of expect off these levels. There's no real reason for TLT to be dropping significantly at the moment. interest rates are coming down, so TLT should theoretically be going up. High yield junk has kept going, so yeah, high yields suggesting that that was just a pullback in time. So it looks like upside, which all this, if all this is pointing towards upside, all these indicators are sort of overall indicators that we use to get an idea of the strength of the move on the S&P and the major indices. They're all postured to the upside at the moment. Could be fake outs, but at this stage, there's a lot of stuff pointing towards more upside to come. Copper hit a pretty good target there. I would expect a pullback on this though as well. So copper, you're looking for bounces, probably in this region here. Okay. Which I think if we throw a fib on that, yeah, that's somewhere between the 382 and the 0.5. I think that would be a pretty solid level. And then let's just measure out. And the reason I'm doing this is copper could tell us when to expect an actual pullback in price on S&P. So let's say somewhere in here. It might actually struggle to get past this block here, but I'd be a little bit surprised if that's the case, just because there's vector candle in here. I'd expect it to kind of chug up and probably retest these highs. I think that's a pretty good target. This was on low volume, so next leg up, we're probably going to get decent volume. That's the hypothesis for copper at the moment. So that should, a couple of days of down and then a push back higher. If we see copper really breaking down past the 50 EMA, then I'd be a little bit more concerned about the overall economy. But yeah, at this stage, gold, I'd be surprised if gold doesn't hit at least spike into the 27K mark. Just a nice round number. But, it's potentially going to pull back a little bit as well. Bullish smart money indicators kind of getting into the overextended part as well. So rollover soonish in gold, but again, it'll just likely be just a pullback. Silver has already started pulling back a little bit more. I think silver should find a base pretty early, somewhere around 23.20. Great Britain pound. Silver's definitely retesting this W pattern as well. So what we're looking for out of silver is essentially, we want to see this play out. It's come up, it's pulled back to the same level as here, and then we want to see that basically a closure above the 800 EMA should see silver run quite a bit compared to gold anyway. We should see it up around these sort of levels, which could be quite a decent run on silver. Oil, let's go US oil. Yeah, decent bounce there. Could be a bit more downside to come though. What is that? Oh, it's like AMA. No, it's not. Anyway, yeah, look, oil breaking down below 63.5. Be interesting. think a really critical level is that 61.5. Should be finding bounces around there. Dixie. Dixie needs to base here, but look, it looks like it's breaking down. Aussie dollar is pushing higher, which would mean Dixie would probably go down as well. All right, I gotta leave this here. I got someone at the door for some reason at 8 a.m. in the morning. All right, I'll catch you later.